So there have been a lot of rumors that President Trump, quote-unquote, colluded with Russia in the 2016 election. Because this rumor was so widespread due to evidence, fake or not, a special counsel member named Robert Mueller, a very respectable person who once headed the FBI, launched an investigation that President Trump often referred to as a witch hunt. This led to the creation of the government document I'm about to explain to you. Because there are Republicans who strongly support President Trump and Democrats who strongly support Hillary Clinton, I guess, that argue with each other all the time, a lot of people I've noticed, including President Trump himself, keep saying that the Mueller report said this or said that, which tells me they didn't read it, or at the very least read only William Barr, the Attorney General's summary of it. I am here to explain exactly what it says, and you can read along with me yourself if you feel like I'm lying to you. Be forewarned that I am a registered independent, and I don't want to see any flame wars down there in the comments, as I'm only the messenger reading this to you and explaining what it says. If I see any flame wars, I'm making a video to make fun of you. You only get this one warning. Don't shoot the messenger either, I'm only telling you what it says. So, let's get into it. The Mueller report is roughly 400 pages long and consists, according to the introduction of Volume 1, 2 volumes, one of which contains the efforts to investigate aforementioned collusion, and the other is an investigation into so-called obstruction of justice, which at the moment is useless, as Mueller was told he could not in fact indict a sitting president of this.
And as set forth in the report after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the Volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office.
If President Trump loses this next election and is not president anymore, he can be indicted for this, as the statute of limitation is roughly 4 to 6 years. Just a fun fact. The introduction states that no collusion occurred between the president and Russia, but that the president cannot be exonerated or cleared of obstruction of justice. Volume 1 starts by stating that they will summarize the first volume a little bit before getting into the gritty details. They describe first a Russian social media campaign, a so-called IRA, which is not the Irish Republican Army, the Internet Research Agency that carried out the earliest Russian interference identified by the investigators. It was aimed at the idea of causing havoc in the social media of the US. It was supposedly based in Russia and received funding from an oligarch named Yevgeny Prigozhin, who had, I'm sorry if I butchered that, who has supposed ties to Vladimir Putin. It then goes on to explain that they made ads of all sorts of other stuff favoring Trump and disparaging or disadvantaging Hillary Clinton. It then says that it tried to organize rallies and says that no U.S. citizen has been confirmed to have been working with them. The next bit of information discusses Russian hacking operations that had been used to gain information harmful to Hillary Clinton's campaign, and that the GRU carried these out. In March of 2016, the GRU supposedly hacked the email accounts of Hillary Clinton and others like John Podesta, as well as the DCCC and the DNC. They stole supposed hundreds of thousands of documents and put them on a thing called DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0. They then released this through WikiLeaks. They then start to explain why this is important to the investigation and why President Trump was accused of collusion. And it says that his campaign welcomed the potential to damage Hillary Clinton's campaign, which is nothing new in any presidential campaign ever, just saying. So someone whose name is a harm to ongoing matters announced later in a forecast to a senior campaign official that the WikiLeaks would release information damaging to Hillary Clinton. Then it happened, and around the same time President Trump happened to say he was hoping this would happen. Next, it goes over a timeline of instances in which the campaign was contacted by these awful, terrible communist Russians who missed their little Stalin and wished to blow up Suka and tank while drinking vodka and banishing people to Gulag. I will summarize each one. 2015. President Trump wants to make a Trump Tower in Moscow. They tried to pursue it, but it didn't happen. Spring of 2016. A campaign advisor named George Popula Hollandongus made contact with a so-called London professor named Joseph Missid, who was in Russia, bled! No, I'm just kidding. Supposedly he had info he called dirt on Hillary Clinton that he offered to him in the form of leaked emails, and that he'd help release it anonymously to help with the Trump campaign. Summer of 2016. Russian outreach continues in a meeting between Russian lawyer Donald Trump Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort met to discuss the deliverance of the so-called dirt on Hillary Clinton. They were offered him as a form of support from Russia. It says that they anticipated receiving this info, but it never actually happened. In June, a cybersecurity firm states that someone had gotten info on Hillary Clinton. Carter Page also traveled to Moscow and gave his keynote address to an economics school. At one point, he lived and worked in Russia, and he supported it openly in intervening in the election, and the Trump campaign distanced itself, eventually removing him. It also states that July was the month where WikiLeaks posted its first emails. It finally finishes by stating that Paul Manafort visited a business associate named Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI figured had ties to Russian intelligence. He wishes to make him a sort of trade-off with him involving having Trump negotiate Russian control of eastern Ukraine in exchange for giving a strategy for winning Democratic votes in the states. Paul Manafort exchanged polling data with Kilimnik, and the sharing continued a while afterwards. Fall of 2016. The media releases the grab 'em by the pussy videos from a few years ago. Less than an hour later, WikiLeaks releases thousands of John Podesta's emails. The government finds out about the interference and begins to suspect President Trump. Aftermath of the 2016 election, the Russian government and other Russian business people began finding ways into the new administration. The high levels of the Russian government headed this and had people reach out to Trump to congratulate him and arrange a call with Vladimir Putin. Kirill Dmitriev, the CEO of Russia's Sovereign Wealth Fund, tried to make contact with President Trump and was steered instead towards a man named Eric Prince and met with him face-to-face in the Seychelles, which is off the east coast of Africa, and discussed U.S. and Russia relations. He was also introduced to a friend of Jared Kushner, who was barely involved, and they talked about a reconciliation plan between them and the U.S. He gave this proposal to Jared Kushner, who gave it to Rex Tillerson, the incoming Secretary of State. In December of 2016, President Obama imposed sanctions on Russia for interfering in the election. The incoming security advisor, Michael Flynn, called Russia up and asked them not to escalate the situation. Putin then announces the next day that he will not take any retaliatory responses towards the U.S. Trump then tweets about how it was a great move on delay and on Putin's part. They then called Flynn back to let him know that his efforts had allowed him to make sure that Russia didn't retaliate. In January of 2017, members of the intelligence community briefed President Trump on a joint assessment conducted by the CIA, FBI, and NSA that Russia had intervened. Later on, 3 congressional committees announced that they would conduct inquiries into this intervention of the Russian government in the election. James Comey, the FBI director at the time, told Congress about how they had been investigating and said in an open session testimony that that the FBI was looking into it and that they would let them know if anything else was legitimate or if any crimes were actually committed. James Comey is then fired 7 weeks later, which will be looked at closer in Volume 2. In May of 2017, the acting Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, appointed the special counsel, assumedly Robert Mueller, to pick up where James Comey left off and to include information related to the obstruction of the investigation. President Trump didn't like this and told his advisors that it was the end of his presidency and wanted to have the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, unrecused from the Russia investigation and then for the special counsel to be removed. He also engaged in methods to curtail the special counsel's investigation and prevent disclosure of evidence from it through private and public witness contacts. These are examined in the later parts of the report. Laterer. So that's the basic timeline and events of it, but if this does well, I'll go into the gritty details and talk about other stuff, like the specifics of what was investigated and what was found. Also remember, I'm only telling you what it says. That's all. Don't kill me. Please. Also, do flame wars at your own expense. I will make fun of you if I see one mention of Libturds or Trumptards. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.